Hello Year 5, welcome to our Re-Day, where we're going to be learning more about Judaism. Today we're going to be learning to understand pilgrimages that are sacred to Jewish people. So first of all, let's take a look at our do now. Sorry, let me just adjust this for you. It looks a bit bright. There we go. Okay, so number 1. Circle 2 Christian shrines or places of pilgrimage. We have Lourdes in France, Bath, England, C, Knock, Ireland. Number 2, who is head of the Roman Catholic Church? A, Joe Biden, B, Boris Johnson, or C, the Pope? And 3, what country is known as the Holy Land? Is it Italy, Israel, or France? Next, number 4, why did God decide to send the floods? Was it A, global warming, B, punishment for people's sins, or C, to build an ark? Number 5, what word is closest in meaning to righteous? A, always right, B, clever, C, honourable, or D, innocent? And finally, number 6, why did God choose the dove as his messenger? Was it A, because he knew all the animals, B, because it was modest and didn't brag, or C, because he could fly and reach them easily? So how did you do? Let's take a look. Number 1 was Lourdes in France and Knock in Ireland, A and C. Number 2 was C, the Pope. Number 3 was Israel, B. Number 4 was punishment for people's sins, B. Number 5 was C, honourable. And number 6 was B, because it was modest and didn't brag. How did you do? Great. Okay, so as I'm sure you know, one of our themes for Year 5 is pilgrimage. And it's a thing that we have been looking at across all of our religions. But first of all, let's just discuss what exactly a pilgrimage is. It's quite a long trip usually, and it's made to a holy place, generally for religious reasons. Let's just recap a few that we looked at last term in Christianity. So first of all, there was Knock Shrine in Ireland, and that's when an apparition, which is basically the body of a dead person, or the spirit of a dead person, can be seen. Observers saw Virgin Mary, who's Jesus's mother, Joseph, Jesus's father, and Jesus. There's Our Lady of Medjugorje in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Now, there were 6 Bosnian children or teenagers who believed that they saw the Virgin Mary back in 1881. And then there's also Lourdes in France. Now, this is when a little girl called Bernadette Soubirous saw a vision of the Virgin Mary, and just where she saw the Virgin Mary, a little spring appeared, and people now believe that the water is holy, and they go to Lourdes because they believe that this water can cure or heal them. So now let's take a look at the pilgrimage to Israel. Now, until 70 CE, it used to be a duty for all Jews to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem 3 times a year, and usually during certain festivals. So the festivals that we're talking about are Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. I hope I've said those and said those correctly. Here is Jerusalem. First of all, Passover, it's a festival that celebrates the Exodus, which means a large amount of people leaving a place. So many Jewish people leaving Egypt. Shavuot celebrates God giving the Torah to the Jewish people on Mount Sinai. And Sukkot celebrates the Israelites 40 years wandering through the desert, trying to get to their promised land, which is Israel. Now, since this time, it's no longer really a duty, but many Jewish people do still go to Jerusalem on pilgrimage because they consider Jerusalem to be one of their holiest cities. Can you remember other holy cities that Hindus or Christians go to? We've just covered 3. Can you remember what they are? And what about Hindus? Pause the video and then unpause when you're ready to continue. Okay, let's see if you can remember. So Hindus, they go to the Ganges, which are in India. And as we've mentioned just previously, there's Lourdes in France, Knock in Ireland, and Our Lady of Medjugorje in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So now we're going to take a look at something called the Western Wall. But in order to do that, we need to take a look at the 2 temples of Jerusalem first. So, Temple Mount. Temple Mount is a hill in the old city of Jerusalem, and here you can see the top of the hill. Now, this is actually where the Western Wall is located, and the Western Wall is part of what used to be the Second Temple. It's considered the holiest site for many Jews. However, it was not always the case. So, obviously, there were 2 temples built. But the first temple was built by a man called King Solomon, and it stood on the top of Mount Moriah. Can you tell me who built it? Good, King Solomon. And on which mount was it? Which mountain? Mount Moriah, excellent. Now, in the Bible, it said this is where Abraham almost sacrificed his son Isaac, which means to kill and offer to God. Now, the temple stood on top of Mount Moriah for 400 years, but unfortunately it was destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BCE. Now, inside it was something called the Holy Ark. Now, the Holy Ark held the 10 Commandments. I don't know if you remember what they are. I think you might have covered them last year. Perhaps you're going to cover them today. And they're the rules through which we live, the Jewish people live by. Unfortunately, the Holy Ark and the 10 Commandments were inside the temple, and the building itself, as well as the Holy Ark and the 10 Commandments, were destroyed, and the Jews were expelled, which means that they were forced out of their land, the land of Israel. However, 70 years later, they were allowed to return, and that's when the Second Temple was built. Now, the Second Temple was built during the time of a man called King Herod. This is when he was in reign in 1 CE. But the only part of that first temple, of the Second Temple that remains is the Western Wall. So here you can see the Temple Mount right at the top, and this section here is the wall. So that's the only part that is left. Here's a slightly better photo of it, and you can see many people praying in front of it. So let's talk a little bit more about the Western Wall. So the Western Wall is a holy place of prayer and pilgrimage sacred to Jewish people. The second wall was part. The wall was part of the Second Temple of Jerusalem, which was the center of worship in ancient Israel. So it was really, really important because many people used to go there to pray. Unfortunately, the Romans completely destroyed the Second Temple back in 70 CE. And so now the only part that is left is the Western Wall, and you can see part of it here. So, can you just remind me, who was it who destroyed the Second Temple? Good, yeah, it was the Romans, absolutely. And which year did they destroy it? Yeah, 70 CE, excellent. Now, the Western Wall actually has a couple of names, but there's one that many will recognise, and that is the Wailing Wall. Repeat after me, Wailing Wall. Good. Do you know what it means to wail? And not like the giant creature that lives in the sea. This is how we spell it, W-A-I-L. It means a long cry because of pain or for sadness. Now, the reason why it's called the Wailing Wall, is because of the sorrowful prayers of the Jews who pray there. They were so sad that their second temple had been completely destroyed. And what they did was they grieved the destruction of the temple, and they also prayed that it would one day be restored. It also has another word, and that is Hakotel, which means the wall. But the name that we're going to concentrate on today is the Wailing Wall. Repeat after me, Wailing Wall. Fantastic. Now, prayer is also very important. That's why many people go on these pilgrimages. So let's take a look. Over the past 2,000 years, Jews have prayed next to different sections of the wall. So first, they prayed to the southern wall, which was the original entrance. And then they prayed at the Golden Gate, or the Eastern Wall. But it's only the last 500 years that they have been praying at this section here called the Wailing Wall. And it's become so important to Jews because as a religious, it's a religious site where they can still remember that the Second Temple. Now, Jews have prayed at the Wailing Wall for over 2,000 years, believing that it is the holiest place on earth, and that God is nearby listening to their prayers. And what people do, I'm sure you can see, it looks like little bits of paper here, just wedged into the cracks of the wall. Many people write little messages to God. It could be a note, a little prayer, and then they put them in the cracks of the wall. Now, the tradition to leave prayer notes to God dates back 300 years. And since that time, they believe that all that's written down on the note and placed in the Wailing Wall comes true. Now, I'm sure you can imagine it gets quite packed. So what they have to do twice a year is remove all of the notes, and then all of the notes are buried on the Mount of Olives. Can you say Mount of Olives? Good. How many times does this happen? Good. So the notes are taken from the wall and they're buried twice a year on the Mount of Olives. Right. So now I'd like you to think of a couple of questions about a couple of these questions. Why is the Wailing Wall important for Jews? And what happens at the Wailing Wall? Can you remember what people write on pieces of paper and who it's for? And what do they do with that piece of paper once they've written it down? Okay, let's take a look. So firstly, we have, why is the Wailing Wall important for Jews? It's the last remaining site of a destroyed Jewish temple, and it's over 2,000 years old. Now, what happens at the Wailing Wall? People go to the wall to pray, and then what do people write on pieces of paper, and who is it for? What do they do it with? Well, they write messages to God and then they wedge it into the wall. Now, this is very important for you to remember because I'm now going to introduce your independent task. Are you ready? Sorry, let me just fix the camera for you. There we go. Okay. You are now going to imagine that you are going on a school trip to Jerusalem in Israel. Now, you've been writing informal letters in literacy this past few weeks, so we're going to continue with that theme, and you're going to write an informal letter to your adult explaining the history of the wall and pretending to write down what you saw and also what you did. I'm going to give you a word bank and also some writing devices that you should be familiar with, as well as information that you can include in your letter. and then we're going to write a model letter together. You can also rewind the video to help you remember some of the facts about the Wailing Wall if you'd like to include them. So let's begin. I've started writing here. Just lift it up a little bit. Okay, great. So here, when we write our letter, I've pretended that I'm at the King David Hotel, and of course we're in Jerusalem, Israel. So here is something to help you. First of all, what to include in your letter. So which city are you in? Shout it out. Can you tell me? I want you to tell your adults about the history of the two temples and perhaps other names for the Western Wall. What is it that you did at the Western Wall, or perhaps what other people do? And what did you see there when you arrived, and perhaps how you felt? Here's your word bank, so please use this very carefully to help you spell the lots of tricky words. And remember that names and city, for example, cities, names of kings, and places all start with a good capital letter. And then don't forget many of the features that you learned when writing informal letters. You have contractions, so we have it is. Don't forget that you put your apostrophe where there is a missing letter. And for example, does not, doesn't. We're missing the O, so we put our apostrophe where the missing letter goes. We also have parenthesis, we have brackets, dash, and also our apostrophe. Rhetorical questions are really powerful just to reinforce a point or convince somebody to do something. And then don't forget your modal verbs. And they're also the different strengths in modality. So you can go quite strong or quite weak. You must, you might, you could, you should. Okay, so I'm going to keep that there, and I'm going to refer to it to help me. So first of all, I'm going to write your address, and then I'm going to write to, it could be to anyone, but I'm going to write to my mum and dad. Okay, right, so the first thing that I'm now going to write about is, let's take a look at the list. I'm going to write which city I'm in. So can you remember? Shout it out. Good, and which country is that in? Yeah, so I'm in Jerusalem, so I know that the spelling for that is there, and also that's in the country Israel. Great, so that's going to help me spell it correctly. So now I'm not traveling alone, I'm traveling with the rest of the school. So I'm going to say, we arrived in Israel 2 days ago. Now, what do I know about Jerusalem? What do you know? Can you remember anything about Jerusalem? How do the Jews see Jerusalem? What do they think of it? Yeah, they believe that it's the holiest place on earth. So actually, I'm going to write that it's the holiest place on earth. And are there any features that I might be able to use? Maybe, for example, because it's such a special place, perhaps I can't believe that I'm there. And I can use can't as a contraction, okay? Cannot or I'm, so let me write that. I can't believe, another contraction, I'm in the holiest place on earth. What was the name again? Jerusalem, and I'm not quite sure how to spell it, so I'm going to go to my word bank. Okay. Jerusalem, great. Okay, now I'm going to talk about where we went. So what's the name of the wall again? Good, yeah. I'm going to use, because I want to give a history or the story about the Western Wall. So I'm not going to use the Wailing Wall just yet. I think I'll save that. So I'm going to say that I went to the Western Wall. Where is it located? Can you remember? Yeah, it was just below Temple Mount. So perhaps I could say I walked down from Temple Mount to get to the Western Wall. I think I'm going to write that today, and I need my comma, we went to the, and it's a place name, isn't it? So what do I need to start my letter with? Western Wall. Okay. And then actually I'm going to give a little bit more information. So I'm going to use a bracket here, and I'm going to say it's just below Temple Mount. Okay, and then I'm going to close my brackets, and then actually my full stop comes after the brackets. Okay. Now, what was that part of? What can you remember the history? Now I've written my little introduction in red. I think now I'm going to write about the history of it. So what can I tell them? What is the Western Wall part of? What was it part of? Yeah, the Second Temple. And do I know who built it? Can you remember who built it? Or who reigned at that time? Good, King Herod. Right, so I'm going to maybe give them a little bit of information about that. So it was part of a second temple, maybe the Second Temple. I think the Second Temple sounds better. The Second Temple that was built can you remember who? By, oh good, yes, King Herod, good. Let me see. Oh good, I've got Temple Mount and I've spelt that correctly, and also Second Temple. Ah, there's King Herod, good. And I've also used my parenthesis, so I can tick that off too. And I'm talking about the history of the two temples, good. So I'm going to continue. King Herod, great. It was built by capital letter King, capital letter H, Herod, and it's the only part left, isn't it? And it's the only part left. Okay, perhaps I should tell them a little bit more about, oh, sorry, hold on, let me just move that for you. Perhaps I should tell them a little bit more about the first temple, because I've just jumped in and started talking about the second temple. What can you tell me about the first temple? Help me. Oh, what was it called? Let's see, is it in my word bank? Perhaps that can help me. Ah, yes, it was called the Temple of Solomon. Yeah. Can you remember when it was destroyed? Can you remember? I think it was 586 BCE. Okay, so let me write that one down. Right, the first temple was called Temple of Solomon, but was destroyed in 586 BCE. Okay, so now I've spoken about the history of the two temples. Now I'm going to actually start talking about the wall. What was the other name that we used for the wall? Okay, I'm going to ask whether they know what the what it was called. Maybe I'll and what was the other? Okay, I think a nice rhetorical question, and that's another thing that we're going to talk about, other names for the wall. So let's see. Oh, do I have spellings? Oh, yeah, because I don't want to spell it like a whale, the animal, and I also have Western Wall there, and I've got to remember my capital letters as well. Okay, so, right. Did you know that the Western Wall is also called what was it called again? Good, and how do I spell it? Good. And I also need my capital letters here, don't I? Wailing Wall. What do I need at the end of a question? Good, a question mark. I wonder if they can guess why. I bet they can guess why. Now, I've included some rhetorical questions here, but you don't have to include a rhetorical question here. You can perhaps save it for later. There are other things that you might want to ask them, like, wouldn't you want to come, or wish you were here? You might think that they might love it, so you'd love it here, don't you think? I mean, it's an incredible experience just going abroad in the first place. So maybe it's an amazing experience. Don't you agree? Or perhaps it's something that you think everyone should experience. So perhaps it's something everyone should experience. Don't you agree? Something like that. Okay, so you don't have to write your rhetorical question here. You can save it for later. It's entirely up to you. Now, I want to explain why it's called the Wailing Wall. Can you remember? Can you remember why? Yeah, what was destroyed? Good, the second temple. And how did that make the Jews feel? Yeah, quite sad. So I'm going to write that because the second temple was destroyed. The prayers of the Jews were very sad. Now, sad's a bit of a boring word, isn't it? Perhaps you can think of a much better word for sad if you're describing that. Can you think of any now? Good. Yeah. Oh, melancholy is quite a good one. Good job. Okay. Now, I think I'm going to talk about prayer now because we've talked about the name of the wall. Let me just take a look at my list here. What more do I need to write about? So yeah, that ties in with what I did at the wall, perhaps what you saw at the wall. If you remember those photos, there were lots of people there, weren't there? And perhaps how you felt. Okay, I know that I've used rhetorical questions. Perhaps I can now use some modal verbs. So might, should, could, would, must. Okay, so let me see. Okay. Lots of people, what do they do at the wall? Lots of people pray there now. What did I do? I wrote, yeah, okay, so I wrote my own prayer to God. I wrote my own note, perhaps, or I wrote my own message. I think I wrote my own message to God and put it in the wall. What do they say would happen to my message that I put in the wall? Yeah, it might come true. Ooh, well remembered. It might, and there's my modal verb, it might come true. Ooh, what happens to all of the messages twice a year? Where do they go again? Can you remember? Great, Mount of Olives. So dash, that's another parenthesis. If it's not buried on Mount of Olives later this year. Great. Okay, so now I've written about prayer. I'm now going to sign off. And again, it's not so formal. So first of all, I think I'm going to say, I've got to go. Where do you think I could go to? Got to go. I think maybe I'm going to another place in Israel, like the Dead Sea, which is a fun place to go swimming. Perhaps you might want to go to a place called Tel Aviv, or perhaps Nazareth. I think I'm going to go to traveling to Bethlehem. I've heard it in lots of songs and also in the Bible. Okay, lots of love. Kaya, that's my name. Kiss, kiss, kiss. Great. Okay. So now I've included, let me just see, all of my features. I've taken a look at my word bank and I've included most of the things on this list. Fantastic. Look forward to seeing all of your letters being uploaded. Now we're just going to continue with our final quiz. So let's see what you can remember. Number 1, please pause the video and then unpause for the answers. Where is Temple Mount? Number 2, who built the second temple? Number 3, who destroyed the second temple? Number 4, give another name for the Western Wall. 5, Jews believe that the Wailing Wall is what? The longest wall on earth, the longest wall in Jerusalem, or the holiest place on earth? Or number 6, messages that are removed from the Wailing Wall are buried where? So, unpause to continue, and let's see if you got your answers correct. Where is Temple Mount? It's in Jerusalem in Israel. Number 2, who built the second temple? King Herod did. Number 3, who destroyed the second temple? The Romans. Number 4, another name for the wall is the Wailing Wall or Hokotel. And number 5, it's the holiest place on earth. And finally, the messages are buried on the Mount of Olives. So I hope you enjoyed your lesson about the Wailing Wall, and we look forward to seeing your lessons again soon. Take care. Bye.